Hello, everyone. How y'all doing today? Welcome to another episode of Wednesday Word with Dr. Doreen I. Wheeler. I am so glad that you joined us today and want to refresh last week. We introduced a powerful anthology, Desperate Women, Desperate Marriages, Narratives of Women Who Found God in the Shadows. And we talked about the vision behind this remarkable collection. Today, we are going to begin a new series called The Story Behind the Story. So rather than simply talking about the chapters themselves, we're going to explore the journeys that shape them, the experiences, the faith, the struggles, and the lessons God continues to teach us through them. I am honored and privileged to have my sister and the editor of this incredible anthology, Dr. Betty M. Lovelace, to join us again. Betty, thank you so much for coming back to Wednesday Word. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So let's just jump right in, okay? One of the themes that surfaced as we were preparing for today's conversation and as I am reading through this anthology and we're talking about it, is forgiveness. It's a word that we hear often, but it's one that's not simple. So I would love us to begin our conversation there. So, Betty, forgiveness is often spoke of as though it's a destination, something that we either have or we don't. But in my own life, I feel like it's much more of a journey.
hmm
So I would love to know when you think about your own story that you chose to share, when you think about your journey of forgiveness, what that looks like, and what is the story behind your story of faith and forgiveness?
hmm hmm Well, thank you, first of all, for having me with you again today. I'm excited about this opportunity. And of course, as I mentioned last week, I don't know that I've encountered a person with as much energy as Doreen. And so you can start out lethargic, you can start out as I did today. And I know that, before 5 minutes passed, my energy level would have been boosted and I'll be exactly where I need to be. Much credit to Doreen for having the capacity to do that. And so when you think about this notion of where my story began and the notion of forgiveness, you started out, Doreen, by suggesting that it's not necessarily a destination, it's a journey. It might be both those things when you really consider it. One thing I do know about forgiveness is that it's most difficult. You know, if it were easy, it wouldn't be called forgive. If it were easy, it wouldn't be called that. It would be called just a disagreement. But forgiveness cuts to the core of who we are. The notion of forgiveness says that somebody has wronged you, somebody has hurt you, somebody has cut you to the very essence and heart of who you are. And
Mm,
so anytime that happens, it's much like conflict. And
mm,
conflict is in this notion of forgiveness. But I know when I do sessions, when, I mentioned last week that I am a facilitator, I am a coach. And so oftentimes when I'm doing a session that focuses on the notion of conflict, I talk about a disagreement and conflict. What's the difference between disagreement and conflict? Well, disagreement is just that. I don't see eye to eye with you.
mm,
Conflict is personal.
mm,
There is not conflict unless someone has personally harmed you in some way. And so, as you raised the question about forgiveness, really, there's nothing to be forgiven unless someone has harmed you to the
mm,
core, to the essence of who you are. And so, when you think about forgiveness, you have to look at the pain, you have to look at how your mind, how your body, reacts to that which has pained you. And we're
mm,
not just talking about the scrape of a finger or the scrape of a knee. We're talking about harm that has been done to the heart of you. And you do know that the heart is a feeling instrument. The heart, does not think. The responsibility, the work of the heart is to feel. And
Yes.
so when the heart feels, the heart has to decide how to react. And so one of the first things that I want to just kind of leave with those who will be listening to Wednesday Word is this whole notion of looking at the heart of the matter. What is
Mm.
causing my heart to hurt? What
Mm.
is causing my heart to bleed? Why
Ooh.
can't I just, pass this over, whatever this thing is, and get back to business? Well, if it were that easy, then I don't believe there would be as much written by, humanity about this notion of forgiveness. In fact, the Bible is replete with instances of forgiveness. And I recall, I think it's in Matthew, and I don't want to get overly biblical today, but you know what, listeners? That's who I am.
And that's why
That's who
you
I
here,
am.
Betty.
And
That
so
is exact. That's why
I
I
like
want
to
you
be
here. Yes.
I have to be practical, but I also have to rest on the shoulders of how I've been carved. And so when you think about forgiveness, was it not Peter who asked, how many times should he forgive? And so, and suggesting that, one time is enough. And so what was the response from the master? The master says 70 times seven. And so the essence of that, the idea of that is that you don't stop with whatever 70 times 7 is. That's 490 times, right? But
That's too much.
that was just an idea that you have to keep forgiving for
Yes.
as often as the egregious act has been committed. Now we all know, and I'm sure somewhere in there Peter must have thought and may have even said, because we know that he was the one who was always saying what he was thinking. And I can only imagine Peter said, "This is too hard for me. I can't do this on my own." And he was absolutely correct. None of us can. It takes a force far bigger than we for us to forgive and really mean it. We can go through the stages of forgiveness, but the act keeps coming back until we have sorted through it and gotten to what has really caused this hurt. And so we have to drill down to that fact. And then another question that we have to ask is, why am I afraid not to forgive? What
Mm.
will happen if I forgive? What will happen if I don't forgive? And so each of us has to ask that question. How will I be robbed if I do not forgive? And believe me, you will be robbed if you don't forgive. And we've often heard the cliche that forgiveness is not for the other person, forgiveness is for you. I'm going to leave that to the listeners to decide where to land with that one. But what I do know is that because we cannot do it in and of ourselves, keep in mind that what has been hurt is your heart.
Mm.
So because I can't manage that in and of myself, then I need a source much bigger
Mm.
than I. And so, I just think that in this notion of forgiveness, when you look at the emotions, when you look at all of that goes into getting you to that place, then you also must look at what is it going to take to get me out of this place. And so we say forgive and forget. So if I can just kind of explore that a little, I don't believe it was ever the intent for you to forget what had transpired. I don't believe so. I am a Bible scholar, and I do read and I do, think. I am pretty analytical because I wrestle with this notion where people so casually say forgive and forget. No, it doesn't unfold like that. You forgive and you get to the point to where that incident, that series of incidents, whatever took you to that place, you get to the point to where it no longer creates the same level of emotional harm as it once did. We
Mm.
know scripture where it is said that he will remember your sins no more as far as the east is from the west. That
Mm-hmm.
means that whatever it is that you have done will not get in the way of him blessing you. It doesn't mean that he forgets what has transpired. What it says is that he doesn't hold that against you. And so for those who are listening, I'm just hoping that, as we have today's conversation, that you look carefully at what has caused the pain, and you look carefully at what will happen if I do not try to forgive, and you look carefully at what will happen if I forgive. How much better will I be if
Mm.
I forgive? And so we have to, as I said, I can't answer those questions for anyone other than myself. And I will also say that I wrestled with that notion of forgiveness because there was an egregious harm. There was an intensity, that of harm that was done. And so I had to work through it. And when I thought that I'd gotten to a certain place, you know what kept coming back?
What?
The memory,
Mm.
the memory. And
Mm.
so until we can harness the memory and redirect, not to suppress, not to erase, but redirect that mindset, then I will continue to be held hostage by what took place. And I don't believe any of us were made to be held hostage by anything.
And that's making me think of this concept, like you said, that forgiveness is not for us, it's for it's not for the other person, it's for us. But I'm thinking about with the story that you shared, how did you realize that forgiveness wasn't just about that, but it was about your freedom and your healing?
Yeah, well, it was, I must say it as it just came to me. It was hard as hell to get to that place of forgiving, and it was more than one individual that needed to be forgiven.
Mm.
So it was hard, and I wrestled and raised the same questions that so many individuals raise. Well, I didn't do this harm to myself, someone else did it. Well, they need to pay for what they did. Well,
Mm.
they need to feel the brunt of, the harm that was caused to me. So I went down this long path of, God's gonna get you, sucker.
I love it.
I went down this long path,
Woo!
and
Did
what
you
I
start writing
realized,
people's name in the Bible too?
I didn't go that far, but I have real good memory, and in fact, sometimes that can be to my detriment because I can remember things that I really sometimes need to move past. But I went down that lonesome path of looking at me. Why me? Isn't that one of the things that we ask?
That's the
Why
first
me?
thing we
Why did this
ask.
have to happen to
That's the
me?
first thing we
What did
ask.
I do? Lord, where were you? Lord,
Mm.
when are you going to address this? When are you going to take care of him or her or whatever the
Hmm.
case may be?
Hmm.
Without realizing that sometimes things are brought back to your memory because it's now time for you to work through them. And so I keep coming back to the notion that I was probably 69 years old when my attention was arrested by what had taken place in my early childhood. And you have to ask, why did 62 years pass?
Mm.
And I'm now thinking about it. I had been going about my little happy business for so long. Why couldn't I continue down that path? And it may well be, in fact, I know it is. It was brought to my attention because it was only at that point did I have enough wherewithal and courage
Mm.
to tell the story.
Mm.
While the telling in part was for me, I know without a doubt that the telling is for also for so many others who have not yet gotten to a place to where they can show that. Why do I know that? I know that because there have been so many people to come up to me or text me or call me and talk about how my story, as the others, are resonating with them. And so I believed I had gotten to a place where I was strong enough and that I knew where to take it, whatever the it was, I knew where to take it without it consuming me.
Mm.
I know
Mm.
that's what happened. The more I talk, and Doreen, I do thank you for having the vision to start to unpack this book at a different level, this anthology at a different level. But I now realize, because again, think about it, there's embarrassment in all of this.
Yes.
And who wants to be embarrassed? And number one, who wants to walk around wondering what someone else is thinking after they read your story? I mean, think
Yeah.
about that. I have thought about it, and then I had to get to a place of just saying, you know what? I cannot be consumed by what others think. I cannot be consumed by how they may see me. I cannot be consumed by, the questions that sometimes we as women ask. And here is that question, and it disturbs my spirit when I hear another woman in particular say this, but a lot of us do say it. What did you do to cause that?
Woo,
Now
girl.
think about that. What did you do? I mean, and
That
I
is the
know
worst response. Like
I've
you
had
just
so
be wanting
many
to punch
people.
somebody in the throat. Like that, I lose my Jesus when I become Peter. Like what?
You do like I have an aunt who used to say before she passed, she used to say, "Well, I just simply say, 'Excuse me, Jesus, I'll be right back.'" And she goes over here and handles
I
business.
like that. I like that because I be like,
So
God, you better keep a sister because I'm about to
yeah,
get ugly.
but
You know,
I know you've heard that when you have read cases about women who have been attacked, or when you've seen
I've
movies.
heard that in higher ed when I'm
You've
serving on a
heard
on a
that often.
situation for
What
judicial
did
or
she
whatever.
do
What did she do? How did
to
she dress? How did
cause
she
that?
act? Whatever. Like
I
it's
don't
always
care,
our fault.
Doreen. I don't care if the sister walked around butt naked, or if the sister walked around with her skirt, almost up to where. Not saying that that's good taste, but that's not an invitation to be
No,
accosted. That's not an
no.
invitation to be raped or threatened. And so, if
Amen.
there's one thing
Amen.
that comes out of this as well, my hope is that we will change the narrative. We will change how we start to speak about what one might have done and look at reality as it is. Somebody was attacked, somebody was abused, someone was accosted, and that's the bottom line. She didn't have to do anything. In fact, even if she had teased, that was not reason for the
No.
act that took place.
Nothing
And
that
so
egregious. And like you said, bottom line, like when you started this, hurt has occurred.
that's right.
A
That's right.
harm and a
That's
hurtful
right.
thing to your core, to your soul has
Absolutely.
occurred.
Yeah.
And somebody has to recognize that.
That's right. And I'm glad you didn't say someone has to pay, because that's
No,
not
I said, no,
what
I'm
we
trying
about.
to get better. You see,
Somebody
you
has to
helping a sister. You helping a sister. You helping
someone
me
has to
not want to
recognize it.
pick up the mallet. You helping me want to pick up the
Yeah.
Bible. Like my grandmother, she walked around, she had a bat and a Bible. And I was like, what is that about? She was like, live and learn, live and learn.
Yeah, yeah. And so when you look at this whole concept of forgiveness, there is unresolved pain that needs to be addressed, unresolved pain that needs to be dealt with. And so, we look at forgiveness, which is a personal decision. You don't have to do it. I mean, we
Mm-mm.
are, it's strongly advised and it is mandated in the Bible, but a lot of things are mandated that we may or may not follow depending on where we are. Well, you know, it can create resentment in your life. And so my thing is, how long do I want to be enslaved
Mm.
by this? How long do I want it to consume my thoughts, my feelings, my actions? And then forgiveness, yes, that is an area where I would definitely say that we must constantly be working on. It is a path, it is a journey, it is a process. But by the same token, I also know that we will not forget it, the incident, the situation that took place. And the other thing that I know as well is that it can create um, a gap or an issue with this notion of trust. I can
Mm.
forgive you, but I do not have to trust you moving forward.
Mm.
I can forgive you, but I do not have to reconcile that relationship with you. And so again, we understand why we do it, and we know the importance of that, but also knowing that it's important to maintain control over you and the direction that you're moving.
So you just mentioned something. Can you help our viewers and me understand the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation?
Mm-mm. Well, when you think about forgiveness, it's a personal decision you've made to stop letting resentment dominate your life. That's what forgiveness is. I no longer will allow this resentment or this pain or this experience to dominate. That's an operative word there, to dominate my life. And then when you think about this whole notion of reconciliation, reconciliation is all about rebuilding
Okay.
a relationship. And it's not building, but it's rebuilding. You don't reconcile, without, the notion of rebuilding. So it suggests that there was a relationship that existed previously. Something took place that caused a breach in that relationship.
Mm.
And now I am reconciling. I'm not suggesting that anyone do that. I think that's left up to the individual, herself or himself. What I am saying, again, and I keep coming back to the importance of forgiveness, so that you can move forward. And that whole reconciliation piece is, rebuilding a relationship if you deem that relationship to be important enough for you to rebuild.
Okay.
Not every relationship is important enough
And
to rebuild.
sometimes you need to walk away.
Sometimes you
Like
need to
depending
walk
on,
away.
like you say, depending on how egregious the harm was,
Hmm.
I have forgiven people, but I can't fool with them no
Well,
more.
and you can only reconcile if you trust.
Yeah,
That's a
because
reckon that the
certain
relationship will
things, when
move.
you break that trust, when you break that, like for me, the way I was, when you
Hmm.
break my trust,
Hmm.
very rarely are you gonna get that back. Point blank, period.
Hmm.
And
Well, and
even
even if you continue with the relationship, you won't
it's never
continue
the
in the
same.
same
It's
way.
never the
It's
same. It's
not the
never the
same.
same.
And nor should it be, because every relationship we're in is one in which we're continuing to build. And so the
And grow.
relationship that I had with you 15 years ago is a different relationship that I had, and however many years, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, the
It's very
90s.
different. Then you were mentee. Now you are, we're on the same plane now. So
Baby, I ain't gonna never feel on the plane with you, Dr. Betty Lovelace. Like you,
you're
my
kind.
older sister.
You are kind. You are kind.
You are the older sister. You got
Mm,
all,
mm,
you gonna always be my older sister. And I'm
mm.
gonna always defer to you because,
Well, I,
like
I
I
I
said,
I
I
value that
appreciate
in
you
our
putting me up
relationship.
there, but baby,
Hmm. If I
y'all
might,
just don't know. Betty Lovelace, like she done brought me through some hard times, and she didn't help me on this journey of forgiveness. And in
mm,
that, I want to ask,
yeah, because I want to share a story too.
forgiveness happen even if a relationship isn't restored?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or forgiveness happens even if the relationship is restored differently.
Okay. Okay.
Both of those ring true. It cannot be restored at all, and it will definitely be restored differently if you choose to restore it, you
Okay.
know? So, yes, as I mentioned, there is nothing that says I have to go back to feeling what I felt before, or thinking what I felt before, or acting, how I did before. That's not the reality is, and we cannot get away from this. Someone has been hurt.
Yes.
Someone's heart, and let's throw that word in there again. Someone's heart has been hurt.
Mm.
And the heart is the one thing that was placed in us for the purpose of feeling,
Mm.
you know? All emotions flow from that
That's
apparatus.
real. And that's what God is coming after. He's coming after our heart. And when Jesus came, he's like, forget all this other stuff. I want a relationship with you. And I
Yeah.
go through your
And
heart
even the
and
word,
your
he said, I'm
mind,
going to write it upon your
on your
heart.
heart. And when I pray, I say, change my heart
That's right. That's right.
and let my actions and my thoughts follow in that. Okay, you said you
Mhm.
want to share a story. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's not my story, but it certainly is a story that, as I thought about today's topic, I thought about, and I don't know if you will recall this woman, I think it might have been in the 90s, the Rwandan Holocaust. You familiar with that? And there
Yes.
was a sister in college whose name is Immaculée Iwelegisi. Immaculée. And so she's Tutsi because it was the Hutus and the Tutsis that were
Mm-hmm.
at
Mm-hmm.
war. And she comes home on holiday from college. She gets home and she's not there very long, and her family is attacked. All of her relatives are killed. She has not, she's not there at the physical place, and she's able to hide out. She goes to a priest's home, and the priest is not Tutsi. The priest is Hutu, and for whatever reason, he hides her in the bathroom. Over time, I think there are some 6 or 7 other women who get placed in this small, very small bathroom. And from time to time, the Hutus would come around calling out her name and
Mm.
call, because one of the most damaging thing was to be called out of your name,
Okay.
but also for your name to be called.
Hmm.
And they're referred to as cockroaches. The Hutus refer to the Tutsis as cockroaches. And she's in this little small space. I forget how tiny the space was. I'd like for the listeners to just uh, Google Left to Tell. That's the title of the book, Left to
Okay.
Tell. I'd like for the listeners to Google that and read, the backstory. She and these other 6 or 7 women are in this little small cubicle space bathroom for, I think, around 90 days. And while she's there, here is the pivotal moment. She's there and she asks the priest to bring her a Bible, and she asked for a book where she could translate the language, her native language, into English. And so she gets to the place to where she reads the Bible. She's able now to read the Bible. And she figures out, here's how it all fits, folks. If you're wondering where she's going with this story, here is where it fits. She reads about forgiveness, and she is compelled to
Mm.
give the Hutus for, number one, the genocide, for
Mm.
killing her family, for destroying all of what she was about. And she gets to a place to where she visits in the jail one of the men who was ringleader to the destruction of her people and
Mm.
her family. So when we talk about acts that have been committed, and when we talk about this notion of forgiveness, we know that we can't do it in and of ourselves. I don't have the capacity to forgive you. Yeah, if anything, I want to lay you out and walk away from it and feel good for a moment. And that's it. You only feel good for a moment. But if there's ever a story that rings loud and clear about the importance of forgiveness, that's it. Now, how did I come in contact with her? Now, I can't remember, but here's what I do remember. When I was at Capital University, I know that we brought her to campus to do a
Mm.
talk. And we also know that even the title of her book, Left to Tell, has a biblical reference, right? Because
Mm.
we know that David, when he was on his way to take the Amalekites out, because they had gone to Ziklag and destroyed David's family and the family
Yes.
of the 6 families of the 600 men. And so David strapped up and he was on his way to go take them out. And he came across an Egyptian slave.
Yes.
And that Egyptian slave said to David, I will take you to where they are if you promise not to do me harm, and if
Mm.
you give me something to eat, which David did. And so, again, I'm always looking for things to preach and teach. And so I preached a sermon based on that, left to tell,
Yes.
based on the Egyptian slave who was left to tell, because David and his men would have never made it to where the Amalekites are, I don't think,
No.
had it not been for this Egyptian,
Or they might not have made it in time
or
because
may
they
not
made
have
it in
made it in
time and they
time. That's
got their
right.
people and everybody back and
Yeah,
nobody
and
was harmed.
nobody was harmed. See,
Nobody
that's the
was
other
harmed.
thing.
That's the
Nobody was
beauty.
harmed. So I just
Woo.
wanted to share that as readers think about, we look at, okay, there's a biblical reference here, but then there's also Immaculée Ibligisi, who is
Yes.
not a biblical reference,
A
but is
living
a
representative,
contemporary
a
reference.
living story, like
Absolutely.
getting back to the stories. And one of the things as I'm
Hmm.
listening to you, Betty, is I'm reminded that forgiveness isn't about erasing our past.
Mm-mm.
It's
Mm-mm.
about refusing to let our past have the final
That's
word.
right. Consume us. Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
as we close our conversations today, one of the reasons I want to have this conversation is because I think so many people carry stories that they've
Mm,
never told. Sometimes we're waiting until we've completely healed before we speak, when perhaps God wants us to use this while we're still in the healing process.
hmm.
And so, Betty, as we close today, I know, imagine someone watching who is carrying hurt, disappointment, betrayal, or grief, and they may believe forgiveness is impossible. What would you want them to hear, and what do you hope someone discovers about God after reading your story?
Mm, mm. Well, first, forgiveness is possible. I think that we have to give ourselves permission to forgive. We can talk ourselves into and out of anything. I know that firsthand. If I say it long enough, then it becomes my truth, right? And so I think the same thing happens with this notion of forgiveness. If you have been carrying it and it continues to come up, if you've been carrying something for months, years, decades, and it keeps
Mhm.
coming up, ask yourself, why does it keep coming up? Let's
Mhm.
start there. Number one, you have to acknowledge it. You have to
Yes.
acknowledge that it happened, and you have to ask, why does it continue to come up? It may continue to come up because it's time for you to deal with it.
Mm.
We've been, and there's this whole notion of sweeping stuff under the rug. We've been doing that long enough. Now it's time to pull the rug back, look at whatever that thing is that created that pain, and say it's going to be dealt with today. There was an article that I read years ago about sisters in the academy, and
Mm.
ever so often a sister had to ask the question, is today a good day to die? That means that today I've got to address this thing. And so I say to our listeners, today you got to address that thing. Go ahead and give
Mm.
yourself permission to do it. And that's a remarkable position anyway, giving yourself permission to do it. Will it be easy? Absolutely not. Getting to that whole notion of the crucible of forgiveness. When you think about the word crucible, crucible is a vessel, it's a vat, it's a place. It could be a sacred place, but it doesn't necessarily start out sacred.
Mhm.
But it's that place where all that hurt, where all that pain, where all that stuff resides. And the crucible is the burning away
Mm.
of that stuff. And sometimes we have to be placed in the crucible because that's where the transformation takes place. And so
Mm.
I would suggest to anyone that, if you haven't, it's almost again like the stages of conflict. And I don't know why this keeps coming up, but there are six distinct stages to conflict. And it starts out with daily irritations, and then it ends with all out war. Well, in
Mm.
between there somewhere, there is this notion of blame where you say you always, you never, you should, you ought.
Yeah.
We go down that path.
Mhm.
But by the time we reach stage four, you know, if you could have worked through it, you would have worked through it. So I
Mm.
would say to the listeners, if you could have done it on your own, you would have done it by now.
Mm.
And so I would strongly encourage you to reach out to someone who can assist you with working through that pain, through that hurt, to that place, that sacred place of forgiveness, because forgiveness is a sacred place. So
Thank you. Woo!
I just simply say reach out and get what you need so that you can become the best you. It's almost as if, when Christ asked the man who had been sitting at the well for 38 years, do you want to be made whole? Do you want to be
Mm.
made well? And the response of the man was, I don't have anyone to put me in the pool. Well, that wasn't the question. The question was, do you want to? And so my question to the listeners today is, do you want to? And if you want to, I believe that you will be shown the path, the direction, to take to move toward your own wholeness, because that's what forgiveness is
That's
about. It's
real.
about
That's
becoming
real.
whole.
And I love the fact that you say that, because so much everybody's trying to do everything alone. And there are some things you can do alone, but
Simply
there are certain
cannot.
things that you
Simply
have no
cannot.
business trying to do alone.
That's right. Because you can do more harm
Then good.
than good. The other piece, too, is you have every right to the pain that you're experiencing.
Yes.
And the question that must be talked about is when we blame self, it's not your fault. It is simply not your fault. Sometimes getting to that point of acknowledging that just opens up, just a vista of possibilities. Just realizing it really was not my fault.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Because I feel and receive that in so many things in my life. And it's so crazy because today was one of those rough mornings when I
Mm,
was missing my mama.
mm.
And like you say, the first thing she would always say was something or something harmed her. Baby, this is not your fault. That's the first thing mommy would say to this. This is not your fault. To
Yeah,
help us understand something was acted upon you,
that's
something
right. That's
happened
right.
to
Something
you.
happened to you.
And
Yeah,
you weren't
yeah.
an actor in
And
that.
you have
It was
been
acted
managing.
upon you.
And you've been trying to manage it the best way you could. So I
Mm,
guess if there's something else that comes out of today's conversation is that you don't have to carry that
yes.
anymore. You know, allow, not let, allow someone else to walk with you. I use the metaphor in coaching. I use the metaphor. I don't know if you're familiar with the Westerns where there was always this stagecoach that would pull up beside,
My
those
mama
individuals
loved
that
Western, so
would
we
be
know all of
passengers.
those.
So think of a therapist, a counselor, a coach, a friend who has the skills to help you, not just anybody that you're just talking to and it doesn't go
Well,
anywhere. But think about this concept of someone pulling up beside you.
mm,
And now I'm here to assist you move toward this, toward the completion of this journey. Uh, it's called a paraclete, Paraclete. That's again a biblical reference, but a paraclete is that Holy Spirit that is there and comes up to you.
mm,
That Holy Spirit, that paraclete meets you. You
mm,
don't have to meet the paraclete. The paraclete recognizes what's going on and comes to you
mm.
only because you've asked.
But that's the whole thing about the Christian experience is invite me in. I'm
That's
knocking
right.
at the door. I
That's
want to come. I want to be with you. I don't want you to have to go through this by yourself.
And that right there is the hook. From this day forward, you don't have to go through it by yourself.
Mm-mm,
From this day forward.
mm-mm.
That's
Woo.
revelatory in and of itself.
Yes. Okay, y'all. I hope we have enjoyed Dr. Lovelace today, y'all. I'm gonna try to get her back one more again. What y'all think? What y'all think? Yes.
And
So
if you
thank
do not
you.
have the book, you see it in the
You see the
background,
book
and
in the
Doreen's
background,
Doreen is going to
and
hold it up, and she has posted time and again
here it go
the
again,
code.
people. Here, wait a minute. Hold on. What's going on with my little thing? What is
Okay,
going
so
on? There you go. Hold on. I'm gonna take the background off.
yeah.
There we go. You can see it. Y'all see, I got my notes. I'm like working on this book. Woo! This is so wonderful. Betty, thank you for your honesty and reminding us that forgiveness is not about pretending pain never existed. It's about trusting God to transform our pain into purpose and our wounds into wisdom and seeking community as we try to get through this.
Hmm.
If
I'm
today's
glad you
top,
mentioned
go
that,
ahead,
Doreen. I'm
go
glad you
ahead.
mentioned that seeking community because we can't do this by ourselves. We were never meant to do it by ourselves. And if there's one thing that we have had as women is community. And it has crumbled a little, but I think it can be reestablished. I remember my mother was a beautician, and I remember when she would do hair, the old-fashioned way with the straightening comb and the
Oh yeah, by the
curler.
stove. Woo!
And there was always people around the house and coming to get their hair done. Well, not only were they coming to get their hair done, they were engaged in conversation
Yes.
and they were releasing themselves. So I think we have to create opportunity for individuals to gather, not just dump the problems, not
No,
just that, but you walk away having gained something. And I think again, that is the power of desperate women, desperate married, desperate measures. It is that the pain is identified. Don't get us wrong. The pain is named, but women are not sitting in that. They're moving beyond the pain to a place of becoming whole, of being healthy. So I would hope that more and more opportunity would be given for that.
And I think that this book, and if people want to have conversations about it, if you want to talk about it, send a like, send an email, get in touch with me. Let us know. I would love to interview some people that this book is touching you and may and
That's
have you
right.
on Wednesday Word. So
That's right.
DM me or whatever you need to do. So if today's conversation spoke to your heart, I encourage you to pick up a copy of Desperate Measures, Desperate Women, Desperate Measures, the narratives of women who found God in the shadows. These aren't simply stories to reread, they are testimonies of God's faithfulness during life in the shadows. Join us for next week. We're going to have another episode, and I want you all to be encouraged. Seek out your community. Start up those kitchen table conversations that we used to do back in the day.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
start up. Even if, like God said, where one or two are gathered, I am there. Get you one person. You don't have to have a whole gaggle of people if you a solo kind of person, and you just get you one person that you can talk with, that you can share
That's
with,
right.
that you can trust, and then let that ripple out. And we ain't even saying you always got to have a church home, because if you read these stories, you see these women are on all spectrums in their relationship with God and how they show up. And one of the things that me and Betty talked about is thank God for COVID, because now you can have church all the time, anytime, whenever you want to. You can pick up anything and anybody and get you a word, get you a prayer, get you whatever you need to get. So
Well,
until next time,
I'm going to amend a little to what
I
Doreen.
do think you need to go to church. I ain't saying you don't need to go to
I
church,
no,
but
no,
go
that
ahead.
that's not that's not
Go
what
ahead,
I'm
Betty.
going to
Go ahead.
amend. Doreen thanks God for COVID. And what I know she wanted to say is when COVID took place, we had
Yes,
to
I
find
ain't thanking
other
God. Thank you,
avenues.
Betty.
We had to
Thank
have
you.
other avenues for coming together.
But
And so
I
one of the
can
things we
say,
know is that we do not have to be in a structured facility. I understand the importance of it, and I am very much actively engaged in the church. But I also know that a number of people did not come back to church post COVID, but that doesn't mean that their relationship with God has been diminished.
and we also, and that might be a whole nother episode too, we need to acknowledge that some people have had some religious and spiritual trauma
That's right.
dealing with the church and dealing with people in the church. And so that's why I'm telling you, and I tell my students, I tell my son, I tell everybody, your relationship with the creator, your spirituality, that's personal.
That is very
But what
personal.
and
Mhm.
just like forgiveness, what we are talking about today, that is
Mhm.
personal.
Mhm.
Do what is best for you.
Mm-hmm.
Do
That's a good
what will
note.
make you happy and
Good
whole.
note.
That's
Mm-hmm.
all we want for you
Mm-hmm.
today. That's
Mm-hmm.
all we want. So
Mm-hmm.
be encouraged. Remember that there is a story behind the story, and healing is out there, is ready for you. Be blessed and be a blessing until next week. Until next week, may God keep you. Go ahead, Betty.
One more thing. You said healing is out there, and it is. Healing is waiting for you. Healing is waiting for you. The blessing has already been established. It's waiting for you.
Yes. All right. On that, Betty said healing is waiting for you. Get it, get it, get it. All right, be blessed and be a blessing, y'all. Have a wonderful day.
Take care, everyone.